I'm home, I shouted into what seemed like an empty house. The lot itself seemed almost divided of life nowadays. It was getting even harder to tell whether someone was actually residing in it. I frowned, about to speak up again, but only to be interrupted. Oi! A deep voice called out from behind me, and I turned to see a familiar face to mine, only sharper. My brother had grown quite a few inches in the last month since I had seen him. Took you long enough. We all thought you'd be back a week ago. I could hear both teasing and worry coaxing his tone. I smiled at the familiarity of hearing him talk with such malice. Well, lucky me, I finished a lot quicker this time, I replied, turning around to face him. Only a few years younger than me, and finally growing to adulthood himself. My brother was quite a brute at some times, but in the end, I couldn't think of a single person who cared more about those he loved. It was always something I envied for. His face changed, all amusement fading. She's worried, you know. My smile also sank as I approached him, his eyes, the same as mine, reflecting the same worry all of us shared these days. I know, I said with attempt sternness, only for my words to end up coming out in a defeated whisper. He closed his distance between us, wrapping his arms around me whilst plopping his chin onto the top of my head, which is exactly why she can't know what I do. I added, if our eldest sister ever found out what I was risking her sake for, you do it because you love her, my brother said with an earnest squeeze. Earning this money, you do most of all of us to help her. I took a breath, holding in the moment. Yeah. I let go of him, my shoulders fading as I faced that shadow interior of our house. Even the birds had seemingly been silenced around here. The lack of life I was beginning to find was more conscious than I thought. As I came back to, the first and only thing I noticed was how utterly sore I was. It reminded me of the training days, being so much in pain that even sitting still would do nothing to ease it. I'd grown used to it then, but now I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt so defeated. You're awake. A familiar voice sounded, and the sound of it made me jump, my hands instantly reaching for my hidden daggers, only to find them missing. I then proceeded my surroundings. A house, cabin, more like it, small and warm, which I extremely was grateful for once I noticed that the goosebumps that coated me. As my mind awoke completely, I looked over to see who I knew was already there, yet at the same time the last person that I expected to be. Akaza, I said, not entirely sure why I felt the need to say his name. He grinned without looking at me, his attention fixated on something he was doing in front of him. Good. So you didn't lose any memories then? I frowned, shifting only to groan at the pain I felt. Oh, right. Shitty-ass leg. Though I was lying down, I tried to sit up, using my elbows to prop me upwards enough so that I could get a good view of my wound. My brows furrowed further when I noticed that I was tied up and bandaged. The rest of my legs was covered with thick cloth, as if whoever did this to keep me decent, yet still needed to address my wounds to have a success without removing anything. Interesting. I won't say it since I already know that you're aware of the condition you're in. You shouldn't be trying to move. Akaza had been watching my analysis of my current situation. His tattooed body was sat at a table, working on something I didn't entirely see, even though he was on his knees. I then realized how small the room was. One bed and a table, and a door that most likely led to the rest of this tiny hut. Were we at the village? Or somewhere else? That's when it all came back. I gritted my teeth. Not really at him, but at what had happened. At what I'd been unable to do. Questions soared through me, and all of a sudden, the attack. The monster. Akaza, what? He got to his feet, the action halting my voice. He sighed, clearly irritated. I frowned at him as he made his way over to me, crouching down. My sense flared at how close he got to me. An odd aura he gave off was striking me so strangely. It was like alarms were being set off. But I didn't move away. Was it because he saved me? He hadn't. Hadn't he? Akaza balanced himself easily on the soles of his feet, resting his elbows on his knees. His pink hair looked disheveled, eyes narrowed in concentration as he observed my leg, gently peeling back the bandages he used. The action was so odd with the way he fought earlier. Speaking of, I had no idea how long it'd been. I couldn't even see what time of day it was. The only window in the room was covered completely. All that was giving any light was the heat of the candle. But I soon came to the conclusion that all my questions could ultimately be summed up into one main one. Akaza? I said sternly, and his golden eyes shifted to my own. I couldn't tell whether it was the firelight or the actual color of his eyes, but they seemed to be glowing as he looked at me. Why are you doing this? His eyes shifted, kissing the corners as he gave me a closed-lidded smile. I couldn't tell whether the small room made it hot or I was beginning to feel that way of how cramped it was on here. How close he was now. I offered you a deal, remember? I raised a brow, plopped back onto the bed, biting my tongue to keep myself from wincing in pain. I declined, you remember? He laughed, tilting his head. I don't think I've met a human with such attitude before. I sighed, trying to find a comfortable position on the pillow. Yeah, well, this human doesn't like messing around with idle chit-chat when she'd been sliced up and thrown. He kept his curious smile, his gaze going back to my wounded leg, the rest of me still covered by whatever makeshift blanket he used to cover me up. At least he respected me enough to not have me displayed. A hum escaped his lips and formed a frown that fell from his face. As I watched him, his eyes darted across me, yet he only seemed to be paying full attention on my wound. I took his attention on them to my advantage. It gave me a chance to observe him as well. There were more tattoos than I remembered from the first time we had met. However, long ago it was. They curled along many parts of his muscle and exposed torso. The only thing he wore was clothing-wise was a loose pair of pants, no shoes. And he did wear a vest-like thing of some sort of a makeshift shirt, though it did little to cover up much, which made me question the point of it. His pink hair was short and vibrant, cascading the paleness of his gray-toned skin. You weren't scared, huh? His words snapped my back, and I looked to see his eyes were on my face once again. I hadn't even noticed he'd been fixing up my bandages. Scared? Was I scared? Some small part of me was screaming yes, but another part, the part that was most likely too exhausted to care, was actually calmer around him. Maybe it was because he saved me. Without him, I'd probably be a lifeless corpse in the woods. No, I said honestly. I've dealt with worse people than you. It was the truth. He cocked his head again, a habit of his I was beginning to pick up. Really? I scoffed, shifting my position slightly. Yes, there is a lot worse out there. I closed my eyes, finding my limbs growing heavier with each breath I took. He hummed, another habit of his. As he fell silent for a moment, a smile formed again. What if I were to tell you I wasn't human? I opened my eyes to pack at him. Silence fell over a few moments, only the sound of our breathing in the cramped room. I would believe you, was all I said. He didn't reply right away, but his brows furrowed together in thought, and then, why? I frowned, closing my eyes shut. You not only made it plainly obvious with what you said, but you also proved it. No human could move or fight like the way you did. I know for a matter of fact it isn't possible. Akaza grunted, his back moving to hit the wall nearest to us as he sat down cross-legged in front of me. So you're aware I'm not human, but you weren't scared? Not entirely a question, and more or less him talking to himself. I can sense that's not the truth from you. His next words were directed to me, though. Do you know what I am, Yen? I met his labeled eyes. Upper 3. The monster that attacked me, whatever it had been, flashed before my mind. You're somewhat related to that thing that attacked me, right? I tilted my head. The piercings fitting together somehow. Before he could respond, I continued. But you're different. You were stronger somehow. Smart girl. I ignored what he said, having finally asked, What are you, Akaza? His eyes faltered for a moment as he looked down, as if he were having an debate with his own mind at what he should say. After a few silent moments, I guess he figured out what to respond with. Myself? Along with the other one that attacked you? A pause. We are both demons. I stared at him, my brows raising. We both went silent before I spoke. Demons? He rolled his eyes, nodding as if he were irritated that I was having trouble comprehending all this. Demons as in the demons included in myths and bedtime stories? That's right. He cooed, but his face fell serious once again. Although, with a profession like yours, I'm surprised you haven't run into one of us before. I thought for a second, my mind whirling before I shrugged. I probably have at some point. Oh, I doubt that. You would have known if you had. How so? He stood up, not meeting my eyes as he spoke. Because demons only hunt and hunger for one thing. The power we obtain, we get by eating humans. I shivered, somehow sensing that what he just said was no joke. No, he was serious. About all this, I felt my gut that it was true as goosebumps took over my skin and my heart skipped a beat. If that's true, I said as he walked back over to the table, then why haven't you just eaten me? That was probably the dumbest thing I could possibly say and have asked, but I couldn't help but let that question escape my mouth. He turned to look at me again, a playful smile upon his lips. I already told you, I have an offer. Before I could get my response ready, he got back up and left the tiny room. A click of the door, the only sign of him leaving so quickly. Before I frowned, staring at the door as my mind wandered and swirled around about what he'd last said to me. If there was one thing Akaza knew for certain, it was that this young woman of his assassin was such high ranking, was not afraid of him. From the first moment in which he spoke to her, there was a hint of that shone in her eyes, just a small glimpse as to what she was feeling under her confidence. Akaza also learned more specifically during their fight, which also acted as a test for her to demonstrate her skills for him, that she was quite a lot of natural talent. However, there was one thing that was painfully obvious regarding her weakness. She was absolutely terrible at hiding her emotions. But that was what had piqued his interest the most, because when they fought, there was no fear from her. She knew he was stronger, and yet she didn't feel fear. She didn't break down and cry. No, the only emotion she put on display for him was how angry she was. She was furious at the fact that he could beat her, and that how Akaza knew Master Muzan had chosen correctly. It was only why Upper Moon demons knew that he had to stick around, because with what he saw in her, he knew she would agree to his offer, even if it couldn't tell her every little detail. Currently, back in the forest after he'd left the girl alone, Akaza groaned in annoyance. He'd been waiting both for nightfall as well as making sure she was well enough to leave alone before he left to finish off what he was started. Those damn idiots. Words must have gone around about Master Muzan's plan with her, or maybe it was even her scent of strength that they wanted. However, it was. These rogue demons were utterly foolish when it came to their hunger. They thought they could just waltz in and take her from him. A demon of top 3 ranking? How pitiful. And so Akaza had to show them that Yenlin was his. That he was instructed to her. They'd learned their lesson, but he still had to finish up cleaning the mess before he returned by the end of the night.